Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everyone, welcome. It's Ken Reed here, your TV guidance counselor with the show TV guidance counselor. Conveniently, it makes sense. It's me. It's my show. There you go. And we have a brand new episode this week with an amazing guest. You could say an amazing colossal guest. My guest this week is Frank Santopadre, who is the co-host of Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Collosal Podcast, which is an amazing show. I don't know why I keep saying amazing, but it really is. It's a great show. If you don't listen to that show, you really should. If you like this show, you would like that show. There's sort of a Venn diagram of, not to put my show up in the echelons of Dana Gouldauer or the Amazing Collosal Podcast, but content-wise, if you enjoy those, if you enjoy this, you will enjoy those if you don't already listen to them. So highly recommend that you listen to them. And I know some listeners at least listen to the Amazing Collosal Podcast because Frank has been a guest that many of you have requested, which I mentioned to Frank in this episode. And we had a great time chatting. So I think you'll enjoy this episode very much. In fact, I know you will. Really love talking to Frank. It took a little bit of time for us to make this happen because he is a busy man, everybody. Busy man. He's living that New York life. Is that still a life insurance plan? I don't think he's living... I am rambling. It's spring. Yeah, well, let's just get to it. So please sit back. It's been a tough year. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Frank Santopadre.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
By popular demand, Frank Santopadre, how are you?
Popular demand, you say?
Yes. You actually. So especially since I started doing the show remote, I put it out there to the listeners. Who would you like to hear on the show? And you have come up several times.
Wow.
There's a lot of crossover between my show and your show.
I'm deeply flattered, Ken.
Oh, well, I'm happy that you were...
flattered that I'm on the same show that Jello Biafra and Fee Waybill were once on.
Yes. Those were super fun episodes. Although Jello said a thing to me that I think I cut out of the episode, but we're not using video, you and I here, but Jello and I were. And he goes, I wish I put my camera up high and had a bunch of cool collectibles behind me. I was like, no.
These are interesting bookings. I mean, Fred Schneider.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of my favorite comedy writers, too. Merrill Marco and Ed Solomon and Mike Reese.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. And you had said before, do I mind if you ask some questions about me? And I don't. I normally try. I just assume no one wants to hear about me. But I have a really weird history of I was in punk bands, so I know a lot of people from that world. And then did stand-up and worked in radio and worked at Cartoon Network in London. So I have this weird, and just Boston in general, which is like a crossroads of lost souls. Just this weird... pool of people that I know.
I'm going to do a little interviewing of you if you don't mind.
Sure.
Since that's what I do. Where did the idea of TV guidance, and I love the title too, where did TV guidance counselor come from?
So I, as a kid who grew, this will shock you, as a stand-up, had a crazy, unpleasant childhood. And so as a kid, I used to pay for my own TV guide subscription, and I would sit there and I would read it from cover to cover every week. And part of the reason was growing up in sort of a chaotic household, it was something, A, it was nice to get mail, and B, it was something I could control basically, and it was reliable. So like if it said Thursday night at 9 Night Court was on, God damn it, Thursday night at 9 Night Court's on. So I had this collection of them from when I was growing up, from the 80s and 90s, and I had them in this sort of spinning rack in my former formal dining room. And when people would come over to my house, inevitably they would gravitate towards them and go, oh my God, and flip through it and say, remember this show, remember this? And a friend of mine, fellow Boston comic, said you should just do that as a podcast.
Just go through old TV guides.
Yeah,
It's a great idea.
Anyway.
Nobody's doing it.
I was surprised no one was doing it because it's such a, these things that are made to be temporary that get thrown away
Of
are
course.
this amazing time capsule of a place and time. Like the joke I used to make, because when people would ask me why I had all these TV guides, I would say for alibis. But because I could be like, where was I on the night of whatever? I'll tell you exactly what happened on Jake and the Fat Man. But yeah, it's this thing where so many people open one up and they go, oh, I didn't really watch too much TV. And then they start flipping through one and they're like, oh, yes, I did.
Well, they're little time machines. My wife recently for my birthday bought me some Marvel. I know you've had Marvel people on the show as well.
Oh, yeah.
And she bought me some of the silver books. What are they called?
Masterworks?
The Marvel Masterworks.
Yep.
Just the name jumped out of my head. And when you open them up and you're suddenly transported to, I remember reading that panel or reading that page in 1976. I know where I was. I know what I was doing. Same thing with TV Guide. Open any issue from the 70s or the 80s and look at that page and immediately go take a strange trip back in time.
It's this weird shared experience that felt like what would happen forever, but I've realized now was sort of a pretty small blip in history that sort of ended after the millennium when people can sort of, microcast whatever they want, where, there are people you have nothing in common with, but you could be like, hey, did you see the Partridge Family? And they're like, oh, yeah, did you see what Susan Day, and it would be this weird thing that you had in common. And it's also weird to me to look at an exact time and know what you were doing at a specific half hour.
In fact, the issue you dug up for me was I think the Partridge Family was just making its debut because Cleveland Amory reviewed the Partridge Family.
Yes, he did.
In that issue, in the January 2nd, 1971 issue?
Yes, the very first issue of 1971, so they review 1970.
Right.
And I got you a New York edition, I think, as well.
That was very kind of you.
It was accurate to where you grew up.
Specific to my upbringing. As a TV Guide purist, were you disappointed when it went large size, when it went magazine size?
Totally, because it's a different magazine. Like it sounds silly when I tell people that, but the writing in TV Guide was great. And I always mention like Eleanor Roosevelt, Isaac Asimov, Harlan Ellison. They all wrote in TV Guide, and when it got big format, it's basically just press releases.
Sure.
Like, there's no writing in there. Even this Partridge Family review, which, we can all agree the Partridge Family, as much as it's beloved, is a really dumb show.
It's fairly cheeseball.
Yeah.
In retrospect. I mean, I'm nostalgic for it. For those actors and seeing people like Richard Pryor and Rob Reiner.
It's entertaining
early
as
in
hell.
their careers.
But it's not a show that a guy with a drawing of himself with a pipe in his mouth should be writing seriously about in a publication.
Though he does praise Danny as a standout. It's very funny to read these things from 50 years ago.
Yeah, and I always love, like, one of the things I like looking at too, and this is not one, but the fall preview editions, because when they preview all the new shows, they don't know what's going to be a hit that lasts for 10 years.
Those are great.
Some of the horses they bet on in those are shows that last like 3 episodes.
Yeah. Those are wonderful things to have. I started collecting those. Those are the ones I hung on to, was the fall preview issues. Because they're really great conversation pieces.
Oh, totally. And there's stuff that's just totally lost. Like, in the sort of age when none of those shows are streaming, because God knows who owns them, and they're 3 episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't get taped by anyone because...
Like one I wrote for.
What is this the one you were mentioning earlier?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even on a network, so it was barely on anyone's radar.
The USA Network show?
Yeah, USA had a deal with Quincy Jones and David Salzman, the guys behind Mad TV. And they decided to get into the sitcom business, or put their toe in the water, and on Saturday nights. And I wrote for this really dreadful... I mean, like any bad show or any bad project, there are good people involved. It's just that the parts don't add up.
Right.
I was telling you, John O'Hurley played Peterman on Seinfeld, was in the cast.
Who's a Boston guy.
Yeah, funny guy. And also the great character actor Paul Gleason from Beaks from Trading Places and Breakfast Club and Die Hard.
Favorite of John Hughes.
Correct. He was in the cast, and there were interesting people and good writers, but it was one of those. Okay, if you do this, you'll get your Writers Guild card, and you'll get into the union. But quickly, and mercifully canceled.
Was it a super high concept show? What was the premise?
Oh, it was a high concept, all right. It was a supersized high concept. It was, how do I even explain it?
Because to put it in context for people, USA Network at the time was doing Duckman.
Yeah.
They were doing Weird Science, which was actually really great.
Yeah, Duckman was a good show.
Duckman's amazing. And then this really weird show that was about like a weekly world news type newspaper. I forget what it was even called. So they were going for like really high concept weird was kind of their...
Yeah, there were two shows. It was us at Lost on Earth was called, and Claude's Crib was the second show. I don't remember anything about that, but I remember that there was a big announcement that USA was going into current run sitcoms as opposed to syndicated stuff.
Right.
Originally produced sitcoms. Anyway, the premise, I remember having a meeting years later with another executive and him just absolutely refusing to believe this premise, even when I told it to him. Basically, aliens from space are receiving radio and television transmissions from Earth.
Right.
But all they get are the Muppet Show.
Okay.
So in an effort to assimilate or to blend in, these extraterrestrials take the form of puppets, of felt puppets.
Ah, how convenient for the budget.
Yes, and they crash land in Albuquerque. Of course, there's your New Mexico Roswell connection, and they hide out in the storage room. I can't believe I'm repeating this premise. In the storage room, it was originally called the Rudy Show, and then it went through several changes. And this is what they wound up with. There's an anchor man at the station, and he's the only one who knows the secret that these extraterrestrials are hiding in a storage room at a local New Mexico TV station in the form of felt puppets. And my writing partner and I came in at the time. We thought, well, it's a job. It's a foot in the door, which it was.
Getting a check.
And, we wound up actually having some pleasant experiences and meeting a lot of great old character actors. And there were some funny stories attached to it. But it was quickly, the plug was pulled, I think, in week 5 or week 6. And I remember we were replaced by the Westminster Dog Show.
Speaking of John O'Hurley.
You're right. And John wasn't even emceeing it then.
Well, it freed him up to be able to do that.
It may have been a cat show, actually, looking back. It may not have even been anything as highfalutin as the dog show. But
so someone was like, hey, it'd be great. Alf meets Mary Tyler
Well, it's
Moore.
funny you say Alf because they approached Paul Fusco, who was
Fusco.
Fusco was the creator of Alf, and they went to Paul with the idea, and they said, "Give us another Alf," and he said, "I'll give you 7 Alfs," and that was Lost on Earth. So there were 7 puppets. And
so Fusco was involved.
Yes, he was the co-creator.
Oh, well, there you go.
He was the co-creator, and I believe they went to the Kyoto brothers. Do you know that? You know that name?
Yep, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Also from Long Island, I think.
You know your stuff. And the Kyoto brothers designed the puppets, and it was just so. Like I said, talented people on all sides. It just added up to not much, and that's being kind. There is one fun story. I got to cast one of the episodes I wrote, and these veteran character actors would come in, and from listening to the podcast that I do.
Oh, yeah.
Gilbert.
It's the bread and butter for you guys.
We love that. We love old character actors. We love, better yet, if they're character actors whose name no one knows.
But recognizes.
You're recognizable. Those that guy actors. And in walks this actor to read for a script that Rick, my writing partner, and I wrote. And I immediately not only recognize him, I recognize him as one of Catwoman's henchmen from first season Batman. And he's an actor. He's gone now. He's an actor named Ralph Manza, Manza. And you'd know him if you saw him. He was in the Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie. He was in everything. He was really one of those recognizable faces, a guy that had turned up in a million things. And I yelled out Ralph Manza upon seeing him, and he just assumed that I knew him personally. Because nobody had ever recognized him by name. He said, I'm going to go home and tell my wife that somebody knew my name. Because people had pointed to him in public over the years. But nobody had ever said, hey, Ralph Manza.
Right, and they were probably like, "Did I grow up? Did you live next door to me?" Like, it was that kind of thing.
They get a lot of that. That was one of the fun parts of living in L.A., I have to say, is you would see these guys and women. You'd just go to the Ralph supermarket, and I remember running into Bruce Kirby, who just died, Bruno Kirby's dad, in a supermarket, and Lois Nettleton. Do you know that name?
No.
You would know her if you saw her. She's in a famous Twilight Zone episode, the ones where the paintings melt.
Oh, yes.
The name of which is escaping me. She was in a lot of TV, and Louis Gus, who was the uncle in Moonstruck.
Yes.
And a lot of sitcoms and Odd Couple. You just see these people walking around or sitting in cafes or sitting in diners, and I used to get a kick out of going up to them and recognizing them by name. That was kind of my magic trick.
I've told the story of the podcast before, but you will appreciate this. I was at a supermarket on Franklin Ave in LA because I was doing something at UCB, and earlier that day I had burned my hand making tea in a microwave in the Airbnb that I was renting, and so I was in like horrible pain, and I was in this Ralph's, and I'm like, I just need some kind of like burn ointment or something to get me through the show I have to do, and I'm in the sort of ointments aisle. And I physically run into Donald Sutherland.
There you go.
And he's
shopping for unguents.
Shopping for ointments. And he's a huge man. Like, I'm 6'3", and I feel like he was taller than I am.
Never met him. Saw him unpacking a trunk once.
Oh, nice. Yeah. with a body in it, I imagine.
No, saw him on the Upper West Side. No, it's fun, isn't it, to recognize obviously Donald Sutherland is someone who's going to be recognized by name.
Yes, clearly. Like, he's not sort of the sort of, I know that guy, but I don't know his name. And I never talk to people because I'm horribly embarrassed. My New Englandness shows when I do that, and I never try to bother them. But I was so shocked. I went, Donald Sutherland! And he grabbed my burned hand to shake it, and just like a vice. And so I started welling up because it hurt so bad. And I think he thought I was just like so emotional to meet him.
That's good. It's a good story. No good deed goes unpunished. No. These people, I always thought it'd be a kick, that it would be fun for them to be recognized by name since it never happens. Another guy,
for sure.
Val Bisoglio, I'm probably saying his name wrong, played John Travolta's dad in Saturday Night Fever. He's sort of a Harry Dean Stanton-looking kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And again, he was in a famous All in the Family episode where he holds up Kelsey's bar after Archie goes on the local news and is part of an editorial about gun control. In defense of guns, he goes to the bar to have a celebratory drink and gets robbed. So I would see these people around, and then I would kind of egg on my friends. I'd say, go over there and introduce yourself and say, hi, Mr. Bisoglio. And invariably, they would be shocked that anybody knew their names.
Absolutely.
So that was a kick. That amused me for a long time in LA.
It seems like too that those guys or those face people all seem to be New York people.
A lot of them are.
And so they would get cast in shows so much because they would be like, I need a Brooklyn guy. I need, a Barney Miller, Night Court. I need a guy who seems like they're from New York.
Yeah, guys like Don Calfa.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Or Gino Conforti, who we had on the podcast. There's a million of those guys. Those guy actors or that guy actors, I guess we've tried to book them on the show that I do with Gilbert. We've tried to, we had Billy Saluga.
Oh wow!
And Art Matrano, the da 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 da. Because Gilbert and I love those guys. We not only love that face, that guy actor, but we love guys that were known for one thing, for one single bit of shtick.
Yep.
And with Billy Saluga, it was, you doesn't have to call me Johnson. So these guys made a living, kind of for years, kind of doing one thing, which tickles us.
Yeah, and it's amazing they were able to do that. Again, to kind of what I mentioned before, where it was like this little blip in history that you were able to get away with that.
Yeah, good, better days, my friend.
It's true. Maybe they'll come back. And
a more innocent time.
It's true.
Well, anyway, thanks for inviting me on, and I'm thrilled to be in this eclectic company of the people you've booked.
Oh, you're very welcome
on the show.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at some of the people that say yes, like especially the musicians, but weirdly, they tend to be the most excited about it because
Interesting.
they're talking about stuff that no one ever asked them about.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
had Kirk Hammett from Metallica. On the
huge monster guy.
Yeah, we had him on the Colossal Podcast. We didn't ask him. I think we asked him just because a friend of mine who's a musician, wrote in. I think we asked him one music question, one single question about Metallica, and the rest of the hour and a half was about Karloff and Lugosi and
of course
Glenn Strange.
I remember when I had the band Veruca Salt on, and this is the one I always remember, is that Nina Gordon from Veruca Salt was such a huge Brady Bunch fan that the house she bought in L.A., she specifically bought because the guy who wrote the Oh My Nose episode owned the house.
Wow. That's a deep dive.
Yeah, and she's like, so my recording studio's in where his office was, so I record demos like where he wrote Oh My Nose.
That's a deep dive. We found much to our delight in booking this show, which we started in 2014. You're way ahead of us in episodes. We're only in the 360 range.
Yeah, we started at the same time, but I'm just obsessive.
You're cranking them out. We found musicians to our delight were like Jimmy Webb and Stephen Bishop and Mark Hudson and people like that were some of the funniest guests. Richard Marx. They're some of the funniest people that we've had on the show are musicians.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like, talking about Fee Waybill, who's hilarious, like, his best buddies are Greg Proops and Richard Marx.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
You know, that's like the best thing there. And actually, one of the things about, I'm a huge SCTV fan. I don't know if you were an SCTV
me too.
fan.
Sure. Well, we had Dave Thomas and Andrew Martin on.
Andrew Martin, yeah, which I'm incredibly jealous of. But one of the amazing things that they did on that show was NBC forced them to have musicians on because they wanted them to be the next SNL. And they got the musicians to be in the sketches, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
They're all hilarious.
I'd forgotten that.
No one does that well. And it was, eye-opening. And every musician who's been on SCTV, I'm like, oh, they're fun. I know they're funny.
That's in a way a throwback to 70s variety.
For sure.
When Johnny Cash would have to be in a comedy skit on the Sonny and Cher show. Or Tom Jones or somebody like that, or would have to, Glen Campbell. Glen Campbell had his own variety show, did plenty of comedy. But
which replaced the Smothers Brothers.
Yeah, but it's going through the pages that you sent me. One of the things I kept latching onto were those great variety shows,
which is something that I've mentioned on this before. I can't understand why they've never made a comeback.
I don't know.
And people have argued, well, like stuff like America's Got Talent or that sort of thing is kind of
it's not the same.
No, because it's not built around a personality. Like that's what those shows
I don't know, I guess, and it's a funny thing that Gilbert and I talk about on the show. There are certain kinds of show business or entertainment that seem quaint, like ventriloquism. Like movie musicals. Like we talked about this with Alan Menken recently. Just actors suddenly breaking into song. It feels like an antiquated part of show business. Magic acts in prime time. You don't see that anymore.
Well, I think part of it is, too, that the people who were in the 70s, you had that weird crossroads of old Hollywood, new showbiz, where you had people who were still around who started in burlesque and, vaudeville.
Yeah.
And you still had people who were sort of in that studio system where they like trained you to sing and dance and do comedy. Like you had to do all those things.
Well, it was the right time. You got that crossover. Like you say, you could have Karen Valentine and Rudy Valley in the same skit.
Right.
On the Captain and Tennille show. I'm making this up. But it's not that far-fetched. It's just, I don't know what it is. I mean, there have been attempts to bring it back, but it feels somebody decided. I mean, SNL is really the last one.
Probably. Yeah, and the cynic in me thinks that it's like, when I look back at all those old actors and old Hollywood people, almost all of them lived a life before they got into acting. Partially because of World War II, but all of them did something else first. And so they brought that to what they were doing.
That's an interesting point.
So Eddie Albert is a war hero and would be like, oh yeah, then I worked on radio for a while and I was a steel worker anyway.
So they had careers before television.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that's true.
So I think that made them like a little more well-rounded. I don't know what it is. And the big thing is too that most things now are narrowcasted, and a variety show by its nature is true broadcasting.
It's just considered, for some reason, it's considered passé. It's like impressionists. You know, we had Rich Little and Will Jordan and Marilyn Michaels on the podcast, and there really aren't too many of those people left at all. Fred Travalena was a guy doing it in the 80s.
Is he still alive?
No, he passed away.
Did you ever see his horror movie that he wrote and directed?
I didn't know there was one.
Oh my God. It's called Night of the Dribbler.
Wow.
And it is a slasher movie about a sentient basketball murdering people.
Okay. I have nothing to add to that.
No.
I think the only guy doing that anymore, doing impressions, is what, Frank Caliendo?
Probably. I think
that's 20 years now. You know, there's no new hot impressionist coming up.
But I think part of that is there aren't people who to impersonate that everybody knows.
That's
who they
true
are.
too. That's another observation. Yeah.
So
the voices aren't as distinct.
Right, exactly. I mean, like all the old Looney Tunes and stuff, you know, as a kid, I learned who all those Hollywood actors were.
Right.
Because they're so distinctive there. But yeah, there's very few people that I think are that recognizable. And the only, you know, you get impressions mostly of like the president, even though I feel like everybody's Obama was just Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, it's hard to come out on a variety show and do a George Clooney impression the way,
yes.
You know, John Biner, who we've had on the podcast a couple of times, by the way, who turned up in these TV Guide pages that you sent. He sounds as good as ever. He does the best Cagney you've ever heard in your life. and he's and a great Paul Williams. And, you know, it's a dying art form.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's necessarily a talent thing so much as it's just like, who are they going to do?
I guess you're right.
I couldn't even think of who it would be. So let's dive in on Saturday night, January 2nd, 1971.
50 years ago.
50 years ago, which sounds insane to me because I still, you know, everything goes from the year 2000. So I'm like, it's not that long ago, 29 years ago. What'd you go with?
You know what? The first thing that threw me is did primetime change? Did primetime start at 7 o'clock in those days or 7:30? Because here's Andy Williams' show at 7:30, not even at 8 o'clock, not even in.
They were trying
what we know to be primetime.
Right. They were trying to do some weird stuff in the I almost did a Johnny Carson impression. Some late 60s, early 70s, the networks were trying to do some weird things where they were sort of really trying to hold on to power from the non-owned stations. I think there was some, this will get really boring, listeners, sorry, but I think there was some law that changed where the networks couldn't own and operate as many stations anymore. So they had to have affiliates, and they were sort of desperately trying to hang on to as much power as they could. So they would, number one, try to extend primetime, because that's when they basically take over. And in this sort of ongoing programming war, and people have experimented with this for years and it never works, they would try to do 60-minute shows on the half hour.
Oh, interesting.
Because it would ruin any other 60-minute show that was trying to do either they basically thought we're going to get 2 hours worth of shows automatically because you can't switch to something else.
Because here you've got 7:30. I'm reading January 2nd, 1971. 7:30. You've got Mission Impossible, which was a first-run show.
Yep.
So
and a huge show.
You couldn't, and that would never happen today on a network. You would never have a highly rated first run show airing at 7:30, which is now a game show slot. Andy Williams is what I circled with his guest Flip Wilson and Petula Clark, who I'd love to have on the Amazing Collosal Podcast. 7:30, that was on for an hour on Channel 4.
Did you ever have Steve Binder on?
Yeah, we had Steve. He's great.
Yeah, his Petula Clark stories are amazing.
He's great.
I love that they give, so on the previous page, there's a little close-up on that episode.
Yeah.
And they tell you, first of all, Bill Haley and the Comets are on?
I know, it's like I said, the great thing about those variety shows is they just throw people into a pot.
Which is crazy. Sly and the Family Stone cut loose.
Well, you had to book your rock act, your sort of oldies act like a vocalist. You'd have to book your Bobby Van or your Jack Jones or that for I guess the slightly older crowd, and then you had to have your comedian. So here you got Petula Clark, Flip Wilson, and Bill Haley in the Comets. You're covered.
Of course, a little bit for everybody.
A little something for everybody.
And I forgot that Mike Post, who wrote a ton of television theme songs.
Yeah.
It's the Mike Post Orchestra on the Andy Williams Show.
There you go.
And it tells you the songs, and the one that really stuck out is Andy Williams doing Let It Be.
I got to find that and see it. I got to watch that.
I love when they try to do, relatively contemporary rock songs.
Oh, yeah, there's that great, it's on YouTube, I think. It's Kate Smith and Cher, and maybe it's Tina Turner doing a Beatles medley. And there's another one from a Beatles special that I think has our friend Paul Williams and Tony Randall and some other people. You can find them if you go searching.
There's an infamous episode of oh my God, why am I forgetting the PBS Bubbles show that Lawrence Welk.
Yeah.
Where they do One Toke Over the Line.
Oh yeah, sure, I know about that one.
They have no idea what they're singing.
Brewer and Shipley. So here's what I circled. I took Andy Williams at 7:30. Now I can change channels, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yep,
so I have I stayed with what am I saying? I stayed with Andy Williams for the whole hour from 7:30 to 8:30, and then I went over to My Three Sons because Sal Mineo was the special guest star.
Yes.
That week, and then I flip-flopped. By the way, I also love one of the things I love about these old TV guides is seeing defunct sports teams.
Yes.
The New York Nets versus the Carolina Cougars. I don't know where they moved, but they no longer exist. So I did My Three Sons at 8:30, and here's where the channel changing comes in. Here's where I flip to The Monster That Changed the World.
Yes, on Channel 5, 1957 horror
Channel
movie.
5. And then back to the Mary Tyler Moore Show at 9:30, which was a staple for me on Saturday nights.
Yeah, Saturday nights that MTM, they just between them and Norman Lear, they owned it.
It was wonderful. And then Mannix at 10, and if for nothing else, just to hear the great Lalo Schifrin theme song.
Yeah, Mannix is a show that I remember the theme song and nothing else. I get he's one of the ones I always mix up with, like Banachek, Mannix. Like there's a bunch.
Banachek was George Papard on a different network.
Yeah, and this was Mike Connors, I think, was Mannix.
Mike Connors.
And then the murderer is.
In that episode, I'm looking.
No, the cop who Robert. Blake.
Oh, Robert Blake. Beretta. That was ABC.
Beretta.
That was
Yes.
ABC. Yeah.
But basically anyone that wasn't Kolchak Kojak or Columbo, I like kind of blend together in my brain.
You've seen Robert Smigel and Conan's pilot with Adam West, right? Look Well.
Yes, Look Well.
Yeah, it's a good
sidewalk. The sidewalk's my pillow.
Yes, it's a good spoof of those. They keep running that joke over and again. I thought you played Banachek.
No.
Weren't you Bannigan? No, I was Brannigan.
Yes.
They had a lot of fun with the names of cop shows.
I haven't a home
in the 70s.
I have a funny story I'll have to tell you off mic about Adam West.
Okay.
You will enjoy.
I knew Adam a bit.
Yeah,
I'm all ears.
I've told it on the show before, but I was moderating a comic convention in an abandoned JCPenney, and Adam got into an argument from his table with Mark Goddard from Lost in Space.
Wow.
And I had to be a mediator. Those guys apparently hated each other. And they were on a show together called The Detectives, I think.
I remember that show with Robert Taylor?
Yes, I think was the lead guy, and these guys were on Goddard and West were on his his crew, his detective crew. And they didn't like each other, and then Lost in Space was up against Batman 66 at the same time. They were rival shows, and Goddard was really mad about that. So at one point, I was going there, I was oh, and you guys were in The Detectives together, and Goddard goes, yeah, until West came on and ruined it.
60-year-old rivalries.
Oh yeah, and then Adam West from the back of the room goes, I made it better
Have you heard Dana Gould's Adam West impression?
Yes, it's amazing.
It makes life worth living. Okay, here we go. Sunday, I picked at 7:30 because I'm no fool on Channel 11, local PIX, Godzilla.
Yes,
with Raymond Burr.
Yes, the original 50s Godzilla.
Yep.
American version with the Ironsides himself. Was Raymond Burr?
Raymond Burr. But then I'm jumping over at 8 o'clock to the Ed Sullivan Show because he has not only Sergio Franchi and O.C. Smith of Little Green Apples fame, but he's got Rodney Dangerfield and John Biner. Mm-hmm. And that's a must.
Biner had a partner, Jim Bailey, I think, at this point, right? Is that what it says? He was doing a duo act?
I don't think they were a team.
They write it as if we were, because then they go.
They just have and.
Who did a Peggy Lee takeoff?
Yeah, but Jim Bailey was a famous female impersonator. Did Streisand I think John worked alone.
This is a very early Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh, yeah. Soon after he was Jack Roy. And at 9 o'clock, I got to go, again, since we were talking about musical variety, I got to go Glen Campbell, because Paul Lynde.
Yes.
Judge Strunk, ladies and gentlemen. And B.J. Thomas of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head fame.
Indeed, and the Just the 10 of Us theme song.
That would make me happy just to sit and watch that Glen Campbell episode.
Oh, amazing. And they describe the sketches here, and I can already tell you I'm almost 1,000% sure who wrote these ones, and I could probably imagine exactly accurately what the sketch is like, where it goes, Paul plays a tipsy surgeon and a detective a la Sherlock Holmes.
With the Ron Poindexter dancers.
Yes, and the Ray Charles singers.
It's a night of Paul Lynde, because I also picked at 10 o'clock Jackie Gleason with the Return of the Honeymooners, which gets its own TV Guide close-up here on the same page.
Which was a big deal. This was
Paul Lynde as a guest star.
Yes, this was, because people forget the Honeymooners was part of Jackie Gleason's variety show originally. And he did in the 70s this thing that was repackaged in the 80s as the new Honeymooners.
Well, they did he moved to Florida. They did the show from Miami Beach, and they recast the women's roles.
Yes, because they have to stay young.
And that's right, because after all, it is a patriarchy.
That's
and
right. Paul
Lynde guest stars as I'd love to just go in the Wayback Machine and see this movie star Washington Kenmore.
Paul Lynde interacting with Jackie Gleason.
It's surreal.
At all.
It's surreal.
Yeah.
It's blowing my mind, and I didn't even know that existed. So I have to go back and watch that one. That's a must.
I wonder if this exists. If it does, a listener, I'm sure we'll find it. And if I get it, I'll get you a copy. But does this come up on your show ever? Because we're talking to people from similar era. A guy like Paul Lynde, who is not a heterosexual man. It's just not. Everybody knows, but no one ever mentioned
we've talked about that. In those days, actors like him and Joe Flynn and Billy D. Wolfe and people like
Liberace,
that, they were considered
Rip Torn.
Yeah, they were Rip Taylor.
Rip Taylor. Yeah,
they
Rip
were
Torn.
They were considered eccentrics.
Yes, and I've asked people, and they're like, "Well, he said he wasn't, and no one asked."
Here's you asked me about ads. When we were talking about how your format, you said if I see any ads that strike my fancy.
Yes.
Here's one on the first page of Monday, which was January 4th, 1971. Bob and Ray were live on Broadway.
Yes.
At the Golden Theater. And this is a Mort Drucker. This is a famous Mort Drucker illustration of Bob and Ray. And you could buy the ad is for the soundtrack. The original cast recording of Bob and Ray's show, Bob and Ray the Two and Only, on Broadway.
Also, Boston guys, Bob and Ray.
Oh, what I wouldn't give to have seen them live.
Oh, man. One of my absolute favorite things ever is the Bob, Ray, Lorraine, Gilda,
It's
and
great.
Jane special.
It's great. We just had Lorraine. We just talked about it.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
It holds up, and it's so funny. Mort Drucker, because you used to work at Mad Magazine.
I did. Well, I was a freelancer. I never punched a clock there, but I was a freelancer on and off for about 20 years. And we just lost Mort last year. Yeah.
Did you work with Mort at all, or were you?
I met Mort once. I never had him illustrate any of my pieces. I met Jack Davis a couple of times. Jaffe I got to know. Paul Jaffe, as you know, just turned 100.
Yeah.
In fact, that's our episode running now as we're recording this. Yeah, I mean, it was, that was a case of something I grew up reading as a kid, and it was a dream, and got to do it.
I mean, that comes up on the show all the time, too, because those of us who grew up in this era, that's another way you learned about a lot of stuff. When you didn't have a video store and you couldn't rewatch things, you could, in effect, rewatch them via Mad Magazine.
The days of print.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times you learned about the movie because you read the parody first.
Right.
Or if you had never seen the show. I'm sure I read the Poop Side Down adventure in Mad, illustrated by Mort, before I ever saw the Poseidon adventure.
Yes.
So,
and you were probably disappointed in the Poseidon adventure.
Those were great. Those were great days. Anyway, that ad jumped out at me, and the other thing that jumped out at me is a sidebar where they're promoting Here's Lucy.
Yes.
And they've got Lucy in her hippie getup. Because Gilbert on our show is obsessed with Lucy and Bob Hope dressing up as hippies.
Yes. It's the most amazing instance of people not getting what they're doing or wanting to do it.
Well, it's like comics from another era. They made Jack Benny do it too, and Milty. I mean, they dress them as flower children and paint their faces. We got to be hip. We got to draw the kids in. So here it says the sidebar. Are you ready for this? Ready or not, Lucy dons hippie threads to fake out Uncle Harry. The plot unravels. I love it. I would have loved that job writing that copy.
This is terrifying 70s Lucy as well.
Yep.
Like we're
Lucy.
not quite Stone Pillow Lucy, but we're kind of Lucy.
She's on her way to Stone Pillow. And, and at 8 o'clock, I circled this too. And the less said about this, the better. We don't have to go into detail about it. Rowan and Martin's laughing.
Yes.
Sammy joins Johnny Brown for, and I quote, a mod look at Amos and Andy.
And Sammy Davis Jr. plays a boxer with L.A. Laker Wilt Chamberlain.
Had to be. How much do you want to bet he wore the trunks up to his chest?
Oh, 100%.
And then I circled David Frost at 5 because it's fun to look at these things in retrospect. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a cheap joke in a way, but the way things have changed. David Frost. Bill Cosby engages in a wide-ranging conversation with David. He talks about his daughters and the responsibilities of raising a family. Here's my favorite. Bill also discusses his plans to leave show business for a teaching career.
Which was the plot of his sitcom at this time.
Yes, the what was that called? Was that called
the Bill Cosby Show?
The Bill Cosby Show. Was that called the Bill Cosby Show? Yeah.
Yeah, with Quincy Jones.
Really great theme song.
He played a gym teacher.
Right, right. I was going to say Reuben Kincaid. He was Chet Kincaid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chet Kincaid.
And then Mayberry RFD. I'm just going to point out shows too that have guests that Gilbert and I had on the show.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Shamelessly plug our podcast.
Please do.
Ken Berry, starring in Mayberry RFD at 9 o'clock on Channel 2. So I'd have to go for that. And John Biner, I already mentioned.
What was your thoughts on those sort of shows that went on as a different show after the show ended, like Mayberry RFD?
Yeah, like Sanford Arms, I guess, was the worst offender when Red Fox left Sanford and Son, or
Archie Bunker's Place.
Yeah. Well, I they're pale imitations of the original. What Harlan? I guess it was Harlan Ellison. Was it Harlan Ellison? No, I think it was William Goldman who used to call movie sequels whores movies.
Yes,
because they were really only existed for the money. And,
although that does sound very Harlan Ellison in his glass.
Yeah, but I think it was William Goldman. And I as much as I loved All in the Family, which by the way, I guess you went through these pages.
Yes,
and I circled Tuesday. I'm jumping ahead, but I have to since you brought up All in the Family. Tuesday at 8:30, I circled the John Forsythe show To Rome with Love, which I remember. And the reason I circled it is in the bottom, you saw this, in parentheses it says, next week, To Rome with Love moves to Wednesdays at 8:30 for the debut of All in the Family, a satirical comedy series.
Yep.
Who knew?
People forget it was a mid-season replacement.
It was indeed. I always thought it replaced a show called The Governor and JJ, which was a sitcom with Dan Daly. But I guess I'm wrong.
Oh, that's right.
Well, your listeners might know better than I would. But
it's crazy because it's a long shot show. It's a remake of a British show made by a sort of untested.
Till Death Do We Part.
Yeah, and so obviously it's going to be a mid-season replacement. They're not going to launch a fall with that show, even though it's a great show. It's
amazing to look back and see how it's, obviously the writers of TV Guide know nothing about it. The world hasn't discovered it yet, and it's just this little show that's just tucked into a little message at the bottom of a write-up of a forgettable show, and nobody has any idea that it's going to change television.
No, and it's going to be up against Hee Haw.
And it's funny because I guess I remember All in the Family during the week, but not well. I remember it as a Saturday night show.
Yeah.
I remember it at 8 on Saturday night as the lead into MASH, and I was only 10 when this would have happened, so I don't really remember it as a weeknight show, but there it is.
It was only, if
Tuesday
I'm remembering correctly, it was only for this like half a season, and it ended up being an unexpected sort of dark horse hit in the 6 months that it was on, and the first 6 months of 1971. And so they moved it into that sort of powerhouse Saturday night.
I see.
Where you had Bob Newhart's show, Mary Tyler Moore, All in the Family. It was that whole thing. Also, Karen Black's on David Frost that night. Which
Karen Black amazing. On David Frost. That's also surreal. Richard Boone. Yeah, I also love the talk show bookings are like the variety show bookings. There's no rhyme or reason to the way people are thrown together. Now, I have to point this one out. Mod Squad 730. This is January 5th. 1971, because again, a guest we had on the Amazing Collosal Podcast, Bob Balaban.
Yes.
Bob Balaban plays a mentally disturbed student who is determined to turn a campus demonstration into a bloody conflict.
So he's basically being Starkweather.
He was barely known.
They call him a young actor.
Young actor, yeah. And Bob's a great guy.
Because I think the first thing people probably know him from is like Altered States, which would have been 10 years after.
Or Close Encounters.
Yeah, which is still 10 years after.
And I also circled Hee Haw because how can you not like Hee Haw with Mickey Mantle? Again, surreal bookings.
And this would be like Steakhouse Mickey Mantle.
Well, it's certainly older Mickey Mantle. I think he'd been 2 years retired at this point. And then Alias Smith and Jones I circled at 8:30 on 7. So I would have to be flipping back and forth. Here's where I'd have to be channel. They didn't call it channel surfing in those days.
Yes.
You had to physically get up.
That's why you wished you had a younger sibling.
Right. In our house, you had to get the pliers and turn because the plastic channel changer was long gone.
It's like a boosted car.
I bring up Alias Smith and Jones because Forrest Tucker was in this episode, so our podcast listeners will appreciate that reference.
Deputy Harker. One thing I want to mention before we move on to Wednesday, in the David Frost episode, the great thing about these weird mixtures of people was that they also had them on the panel all together, usually. So they also interacted. In addition to Richard Boone and Karen Black, there's a biologist on who wrote a book called... which is the most 1971 title I can think of in my life, Utopian Motherhood.
I love it.
New trends in human reproduction.
Yeah, there was another one later somewhere. There was another one of the, I think I'll get to it. I think I circled another Frost or a Cavett show that had a weird collection of people. Well, I circled Late Night. I didn't know if I could color outside the lines and do Late Night.
Absolutely.
But Carson that night on 4, obviously at 11:30, opposite Merv, Carson had, I was just talking before about Billy Saluga, who was in the Ace Trucking Company.
Yes.
And they were on Carson that night. And another podcast guest we had, Ronnie Schell, would have been opposite that on Dick Cavett on Channel 7. Now, that's weird. I mean, you had Carson, Cavett, and Merv all competing.
And all got massive ratings.
Yeah.
Like... crazy ratings at 11:30 p.m. on a weeknight with those three things, which is...
Well, Cavett was so different. It was so different than Carson.
And a bunch of those are online, and I love revisiting those.
Yeah, Cavett had Larry McNeely, banjo player, Glen Campbell, and Ronnie Schell.
Of the Jim Neighbors Show.
There you go.
And 90 minutes.
Yep.
And this is when The Tonight Show was 90 minutes.
Yeah, The Tonight Show would have been in L.A. by then, I think,
Yeah.
and certainly. And Cavett was doing his show here.
Yes, I think it was New York.
Pretty sure
I don't
of it.
think he moved to L.A. till like the early 80s.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's a really out there kind of Tuesday night.
For
and
sure.
I could have gone with Green Acres and the Don Knotts variety show. I mean, there's so much here, so much gold to choose from.
Yeah, this is a really good week, I will say. Wednesday, what jumped out at you?
A couple of things. Again, another ad for Barbizon Model School.
Yes, be a model or just look like one.
That's got to be gone. Sometimes I see these ads, and because I live in Manhattan, I want to just get in a cab and go to the location and see if the thing is still standing. I can't imagine. I don't know for a fact, but I can't imagine the Barbizon School of Modeling is still there. But I remember it as being a big thing.
Oh, yeah, and it would be referenced in a lot of stuff. For those of you in Manhattan, 574 Fifth Avenue, if you want to check it out and see if it's still there. The creepiest thing about this is...
Risk your life by getting in a cab during COVID.
Risk your life, yes.
To go see if Barbizon is still there.
Why did your father die? He was insistent on seeing if Barbizon was still there. Girls 14 or older use this coupon.
A little weird.
Yeah.
Here's one I had to circle at 8 because this is red meat to my listeners, and that is Uncle Milty guest starring on the Danny Thomas Show.
Yeah.
With Sid Melton. You can't ask for better.
And this is the title is of this I guess it was a reboot of
It was the sequel or the follow-up of Make Room for Daddy, Make Room for Granddaddy.
For Granddaddy.
With the same cast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Milton Berle, again, on my show as well, him and George C. Scott are the two people I like to collect stories of them being horrible to people.
Does Milty come? You've done 500,000 episodes of this thing. I imagine Milty has come up a lot.
Quite a bit. My favorite, most recent one was I had a British comedian, Jill Brand, on, who's brilliant. And she did the Montreal Comedy Festival in the late 80s or early 90s. And she's like a very sort of punk rock feminist comic. And she was standing backstage waiting to go on and just had her arms crossed because she was just standing like that. And Milton Berle comes up to her and he goes, "Don't worry, girlie. I'm not going to touch your titties."
Classy.
And she was like, "Fuck off. Who's this guy?"
I met Milty once at the LA Friars Club, and I was alone at one end of the bar waiting for someone, and he was on the opposite end of the bar. And I was trying to be cool, as you say.
Yeah.
As you said earlier in the show, don't hassle famous people. And he yelled across the bar, "Excuse me, do you use Viagra?" And I'm not sure what he was after there, but there's a lot of material in that question, especially because it was Milton Berle.
Yeah.
And I wasn't exactly starstruck, but I was struck. I was just kind of struck dumbfounded.
I mean, an old man at a bar yelling that at you is dumbfounding, regardless of who
it was Uncle Milty, so it was we make allowances for crazy celebrities.
Exactly.
Let's see what I have here too. I circled this because it was funny. On Channel 21, public television here in New York.
Yes.
My wife said that's enough. A Canadian documentary about pipe organ enthusiasts.
This has weirdly come up on the show a bunch of times because for some weird reason, this aired for years. Years.
I don't even know what it means.
I don't either, and I've tried to find a copy of it because it sounds amazing. They focus on one particular pipe organist named Gaylord Carter. It sounds like a sketch.
It does.
Canadian pipe organ enthusiasts.
What it ends with, and again, another Amos and Andy reference, an interview with former Amos and Andy organist. This is Amos and Andy obsession here.
Yes.
Gaylord Carter. There you go.
Like this pops up in probably at least 10 TV guides I have.
Defies explanation. I circled Johnny Cash at 9 because, for God's sake, he's got Derek and the Dominoes.
Yeah,
and
that's a really
and
good
Homer
show.
and Jethro.
Yes.
And Ramblin' Jack Elliott, because this episode has everything. And Carl Perkins is going to sing Blue Suede Shoes or something.
And the Statler brothers
and
as
the
well.
damn Statler brothers, yeah. So yeah, those again, you can't get more entertainment for that in an hour.
No, and the weird thing too about a lot of those variety shows, especially the musical ones, with people like Johnny Cash, who are obviously still well loved to this day. you don't even get releases of the music from the show.
No, they must be tied up in weird rights stuff.
Because there's cool, bizarre covers.
Who knows? I don't have an answer to your question about why you don't see variety shows like this anymore. But when you look at that lineup, even the silly Don Knotts show from previous, who was on that one? Here I have the page: Louis Nye, Sebastian Cabot, and the Lennon sisters.
Of course,
you just want to go back and watch that with stock players Elaine Joyce and Gary Berghoff.
It sounds like you've just put a bunch of entertainers' names in a bag, shook it up, and dumped it out.
Pretty
and that's
much.
How you booked the show.
Pretty much. Here's another one: Jim Neighbors at 8:00 on Channel 2. Barbara McNair, Frank Sutton, and Ronnie Shell. How did he book them?
Throwing darts at a board of
But
memes.
it's just great. It's just great to see these people all honestly, that Johnny Cash show and the Tom Jones show were great hours every week.
Yeah.
And you saw wonderful music. They did the Tom Jones show across the pond, I think. But you got to see Bobby Darin. You would see, these people would turn up on Flip Wilson too.
And a good mix of old and new people.
Really good. Yeah, there's nothing like it. You're not going to get more entertainment for your buck than that hour of the Johnny Cash show.
That night, too, before we move on to Thursday, the David Frost that night jumped out because it's E.G. Marshall, Sally Kellerman, and movie producer Larry Tucker.
Yeah, I would have watched it just to see Larry Tucker.
What a weird mix. Have a producer on.
Yeah, you want to do Thursday?
Yeah, let's do Thursday.
Let's see. As I said, Jim Neighbors at 8. I would have been watching that. I'm a sucker for any game show, so maybe I would have gotten up and changed the channel and put on To Tell the Truth in the middle. Or an Avengers episode on Channel 9.
Yes.
And these couldn't have been in first run. Interestingly, I don't see repeat. I don't see an R or repeat in any of these.
That would have been first run Avengers. That would have been the tail end of the Diana Rigg.
Right. I don't see repeat anywhere, and I guess that's because it's January. And so this is all first run programming. Nothing was in repeats yet. If you'd sent me a July issue, we'd be seeing that R.
Absolutely.
And this one I jumped all over because this is exactly what we're talking about. Changing Scene, a new music variety show at 8:30 on ABC. This is catnip. This is like hippie TV. Comedy blackouts pace this modern minstrel show. Perhaps that should be rephrased. Starring Engelbert Humperdinck, Don Adams, Barbara Eden, the Mike Curb Congregation, and the Osmond Brothers.
Of course.
I'm all over that.
And Barbara does a bunch of songs with Engelbert Humperdinck, including MacArthur Park.
Right, which will pale in comparison to Gilbert's version.
Oh, my God. Have you ever had Melanie Chardoff on?
No.
Oh, Melanie would be great.
Yeah? I'll write her down.
She I can put you in touch.
I remember her from Fridays.
She's amazing. She has a new book out as well, but she had my favorite Patrick McNee story.
There's a Patrick McNee story?
Yes, she befriended him later in life, and he would travel all over the world and just go to these amazing parties in exotic places, but he didn't have any money. And she was like, Patrick, how are you doing this? And he's like, here's the secret. Have 2 good stories and never stay more than 3 days.
Oh, I love it.
And she was like, all right.
I love that.
It's amazing.
Listen to these songs. Put For the Good Times and Put Your Hand in the Hand, which was a Christian song. Mm-hmm. Put your hand in the hand of the man who steals the water. That's what Engelbert's going to sing. Barbara Eden is going to sing Didn't We? And MacArthur Park. Jimmy Webb and the congregation, the entire congregation, or do they mean the Mike Curb congregation by themselves? Singing Walk a Mile in My Shoes and One Bad Apple. There's more. And Green Green. And that preempted, by the way, Bewitched and Barefoot in the Park.
Will not be seen tonight.
Which was said will not be seen tonight.
What a bizarre. That is just weird. And again, there's, 3 variety shows on this night?
Yeah.
As well?
I mean, that's a great one right there. And then I circled, let's see. I'm not into Bridge on the River Kwai on Channel 2. See, in those days, it's a great movie, but you don't want to sit there for 3 hours watching it with commercials.
No.
Of course, that was your only option then, because this is pre-cable.
Yeah, and I think this might have been the $1 Million Movie in New York, where they would show the same movie every night for the whole week.
I don't know that was on network. I think the $1 Million Movie.
Is that a UHF station?
I think the $1 Million Movie was Channel 9 or PIX. It was in syndication.
Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah, this is some CBS movie of the, I hesitate to call it movie of the week because that implies that it was an original.
That's true. It is an old movie. That says rerun.
That says rerun. That's the first time I saw a rerun. Of course, I have to pick The Odd Couple at 9:30. We did an Odd Couple 50th anniversary show with Jack Klugman's two sons.
Oh, amazing.
That was a blast. We did it a couple of months ago. And here's, which episode is that? Oh, that's the one where Felix enters the cooking competition.
Yes.
So this is first run.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see shows that had such a life in reruns and in syndication running for the first time as a new thing.
Yeah. And this was the golden age of it. I mean, you had Brady Bunch still running at this time. Yeah, there's
Bewitched,
a ton of them.
obviously.
Bewitched,
yeah.
Which was preempted.
A bunch of them.
Everyone
And
angry.
Somewhere in this TV guide, too, was an extensive interview with Tony Randall that I ate with a spoon. Here we go. 10 o'clock, Dean Martin. Now, you can't get better than this. Dean Martin with guests Dennis Weaver, Bob Newhart, and this is a new one on me, Bobby Martin, country singer?
Country singer. I've never heard of him either.
Or she. It's a B-O-B-B-I-E.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But here, Dennis Weaver is going to sing Another Way, whatever that is. Dean's going to sing How Deep is the Ocean, Georgia Sunshine, and he's going to duet with Dennis Weaver McLeod on Don't Fence Me In.
And this is the best
I'm not moving off that couch, Ken.
No, and you haven't even gotten to the fact that Bob Newhart is doing a sketch with Dean about reporters at a nudist camp.
Of course he is. Of course he is. And this was water cooler television.
Of course.
It wasn't quite the big deal that Laugh-In was, or All in the Family, or shows that kind of changed television. But I remember the Dean Martin show being a big deal, and people going out of their way to watch it and then talk about it.
Yeah, and this would have been sort of, it would have still been seen as a little bit old-fashioned because he was, a 50s person still hosting this show. And it was weirdly, there's a show I never heard of that it's up against on Channel 13 called Soul with an exclamation point. And that sounds fascinating.
It does.
This episode, this is 1971. Black women are in the spotlight. Guests include pianist Margaret Harris, dancer Carmen de la Vade, and a medley of Negro spirituals, and singer Carolyn Franklin, Aretha's sister, who performs Going in Circles and Chain Reaction. Also poetry recitation by poets Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, and Jackie Early, poet actress Marilyn Berry, and actress Novella Nielsen.
That does look interesting. 60 minutes. That would have been PBS, yeah.
Yeah. Which you don't see things like that.
And here's Sal Mineo again making a second appearance. I bring him up because he's in an episode of The Immortal at 10 o'clock, which Gilbert and I talked about. That was a show with Christopher George about a guy who had special blood. He had blood that allowed him to live forever. And he was being pursued. We did a whole episode. Gilbert and I used to do these episodes on Thursdays, these mini episodes. And we did an episode called Man on the Run shows.
Oh, yes.
And the fugitive being the standard bearer. But
did the Invaders come up in there as well?
The Invaders was one. Larry Cohen had another show called Coronet Blue. There was a Man on the Run show with, I think, Frank Converse. There was obviously The Immortal. There was one with Ben Gazzara called Run for Your Life.
Yes.
There was The Hulk later.
Yep. Invisible Man.
Yeah. So this was The Immortal with Sal Mineo, who's making a second appearance, and as playing a character named Johnny Iron Eyes Cody, ladies and gentlemen.
World's favorite Italian-American fake Native American.
The weeping Native American from the litter commercials who was an Italian guy from Brooklyn.
Which is sums up America better than anything else I can imagine.
There you go. There you go.
And then the final night of the week, also weird ad in here for zip codes.
Yeah, I didn't print that page.
It's A83. It's literally they're just trying to get people to use zip codes, which are apparently new.
I love it.
And it says, unzipped mail is trouble. Whenever an unzipped letter goes, trouble follows. Extra steps in the sorting operations, extra stops along the way. Don't hold up the mail service. Use Zip.
The ads are great. You know, another thing I miss about TV Guide is the wonderful covers.
Yes.
Is that artists like Bob Peake and
Jack Davis
and Bernie Fuchs and Charles Amzell got to do these wonderful covers. I mean, that's another dying art. I mean, as magazines went away, so went that.
They commissioned art. Those MSOs are amazing.
Yeah, they're great. They're really great.
One of my quests doing this show is to find out what the hell happened to any of that art. And
probably sold at
knows.
auction, you know. A lot of the mad art, the great mad art, the Norman Mingo stuff and Jack Davis stuff and all that stuff from the 60s was sold at auctions to private collectors. And I would assume this stuff went the same way.
I've looked at auction catalogs. I've tried to find people who own one. Nothing.
Interesting.
It's bizarre.
It's very interesting.
There's so many.
Here's something that jumped out at me. Also, the new Andy Griffith Show. You were just talking before about second, weak stepsisters or stepbrothers of the original.
And this is
Andy's
the debut.
Back in town.
The debut.
Yeah, I circled it because Lee Merriweather's on it, and Gilbert and I had her on the podcast, and she was fun. And
I love her.
Gilbert got saucy with her, and she threatened to spank him, which was one of the highlights of doing the show. But here we go. I had to circle this terrible movie, Queen of Atlantis.
I've not seen this.
I didn't circle a lot of movies because that's not the fun of going through old TV guides. But two mining engineers discovered the lost continent of Atlantis beneath the Sahara Desert.
Ironically,
and it's an Italian cast. It's with some French actors thrown in. So that's something I would enjoy.
I'm gonna have to try to find that. I wonder if that is under a different title that I would know it from, and that's why I haven't seen it. Also, Don Knotts was on that new Andy Griffith Show, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
He's an entertaining restaurant owner.
That could not have lasted long.
No, because it's on Contemporary with Mayberry RFD.
And he was a mayor of a small town in North Carolina, so they didn't venture far.
Yeah.
And George Lindsay and Paul Hartman from who was Emmett on Mayberry RFD, guest star.
Yeah.
So they're
as Goober and Emmett.
They're trying their hard. They're trying their best to capture the magic of the Griffith Show. We were talking with Dana Gould recently on our podcast about The Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
Yes,
the first. I guess it was maybe it was the second. I'm trying to remember that or Mr. Limpet. I think it was after Limpet. And it was after Limpet. They threw everybody from Mayberry that they could get their hands on into that movie.
Of course,
and including the writers and the director. So really, it was a Barney Fife movie.
Yes,
under a different name.
Playing that exact character. Yeah, you guys were mentioning The Love God too, which is one of my all-time favorite comedies.
Yeah, it's
it holds up so well, and I wish Nat Hiken had survived to make more movies. Because
we differ there, but it is an interesting curio.
I love that movie.
Here's what I circled: Brady Bunch, because it's about the Brady's anti-cigarette campaign.
Yes,
it almost goes up in smoke. I remember this one. Greg is caught taking a puff.
Yes, which is an unusual thing in 1971 to be anti-cigarette.
It's interesting, especially because there's cigarette ads all through this.
All in it. Yep.
There's a cigarette ad on the very next page. Andy Griffith. Andy Griffith he also failed in another series where he was a college headmaster.
Oh, that's right.
And I can't remember the name of that, except maybe it was called Headmaster?
Sheriff, headmaster,
I
mayor.
think after the Andy Griffith Show, he failed in that series, and then I think he came back. I may stand corrected, but then he came back to familiar turf.
Right.
And so
it's like I strayed too far from.
Yeah,
what
the new
like.
Andy Griffith Show really is a reboot of the Andy Griffith Show.
Yes.
I circled the Partridge Family because that was a show that I liked. And I like the music, and our podcast guest Gino Conforti is in that episode.
He's in this episode, as
Mom
Logan.
drops out. Yeah.
And Milton Berle shows up again at 9:00 in That Girl.
And I circled it, brother.
Yep.
Milton Berle and Danny Thomas are besieging Anne. It all starts when the late Uncle Harry's trunk winds up in her basement.
It's so weird how many of these shows have the same cast in the same week.
Yes. They were on the lot.
Yeah, let's just shoot it.
That show was created by a recurring podcast guest of ours, the great Bill Persky.
I enjoyed that show. It was. I feel like that show was pretty ahead of its time.
That Girl?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was created by Bill and Sam Denoff, and it was the first. It was sort of the first single woman starring in her own show.
Yeah, I mean, Mary Tyler Moore.
She was
a great
unattached.
show. Yeah. It gets mentioned all the time as that, but That Girl was on at the same time.
I think That Girl came first.
Yeah.
Actually. And I had to circle Love American Style because Gilbert and I are obsessed with Love American Style. We had Charlie Fox on the show who wrote the theme. We had Stuart Margolin, who was in all those cheesy blackouts, on the show. And this one's got Tony Dow and Ozzie and Harriet.
Yep.
So you can't go wrong.
It's a 50s throwback, Love American Style, the rare non-horror anthology show.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's gone, I guess.
It's expensive.
Anthology shows, unless you count something like Fargo, where they do a different season or a different cast and a different story each season.
American Horror Story, which is the same cast and a different
don't
story.
they call those anthology series?
Yeah, so that's a slight variation, but someone told me it was just so expensive to do an anthology show because you have basically a new show every week.
Right.
But there was, I remember they did the George Burns comedy hour in the 80s, and it was most of the SCTV people would be in every episode, and I thought at first it was one of those just burning unsold pilots shows they would do, but it was a written comedy half-hour anthology show with the same cast every week, but different shows.
Yep. I lost the page, but somewhere, forgive me, because somewhere I circled Night Gallery.
Yes, Night Gallery was 2 nights before.
Okay.
Which weirdly...
I circled that one. Gilbert's least favorite show ever.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Actually, Dana and I went to, in L.A. a year or two ago, they had an exhibit of all the actual paintings from Night Gallery. I went with Dana.
Wow. But I would be remiss in
really
not pointing that one out because Al Lewis is in that episode.
Yes, and Jackie
Vernon. So there you go.
Jackie Vernon, who people may know as Frosty the Snowman.
Sure.
And he was also in a horror movie called Microwave Massacre.
You're good with the obscure horror movies.
That's my thing. Oh, and Tom Bosley's in this one, too.
Yes, Tom Bosley. Last but not least, because I am a sucker for these variety shows, and we're back to the Ace Trucking Company. Once again, Billy Saluga and Patty Deutsch.
Making the rounds.
Tom Jones. Which I think was called This Is Tom Jones.
Yes.
But here it's just called Tom Jones. And that's the other thing is they cheat on these titles in the TV guide.
Saving money with printing less letters.
Yeah, they don't give you the actual titles, which I call bullshit on.
Yeah.
But Tom Jones has Phyllis Diller, musical comedy star Frankie Vaughan, who had to go back to English music halls.
Easily.
The Ace Trucking Company, but the Ace Trucking Company, I think, was part of the company by this point, and Lulu. So there you go. There's the formula. You get your pop singer, you get your comedian, you get your comedy repertory, you know, your various mixed nuts. And,
something for everybody.
And something for the pepper pots for the old ladies.
See, I was drawn to it's up against another English show, Strange Report, which was a really cool show.
I don't even remember that show.
So this
Anthony
is
Quayle. Wow.
Yes, as criminologist Adam Strange.
New on me, buddy.
This was sort of a horror anthology show.
I know Adam Strange from DC Comics, but
not that Adam Strange.
Right.
Like, I'm a big Adam Strange fan, and Hugo Strange as well. But this is it's sort of Kolchak-y.
Wow.
It's a weird lost show. I believe it was created by the same people who did the Avengers. And this first episode is called Skeleton, Let Sleeping Heroes Lie. Strange and his young assistant mix a little science and a lot of legwork to learn the identity of an unearthed skeleton. Unusual suspects on the case. The skeleton was a murder victim killed in 1941. It's like these weird sort of a horror show. And I think it only went one season.
Interesting. No, that's a new one on me. There was some show produced. Has this come up on the show? Mystery Vault of Mystery or something. It was a show produced by Norman Lloyd.
No.
You know what I'm talking about? He's now Norman Lloyd is still with us. Journey into Mystery, or I can't remember the name of it. It was a horror anthology series, and Gilbert and I talked about it.
Is this the one with Lon Chaney Jr.?
No, I don't think so. It was called. Let me see. I'm Googling. Do your guests ever Google in the middle of a show?
They do.
Or is that verboten?
It's it's an unofficial rule not to, but we've broken that in COVID.
All right, I give up. So we'll leave something unanswered that your listeners can figure out.
Yes.
So Norman Lloyd, who is now what, 106.
Wow.
God bless him. Produced one of these prime time that you're talking about. It was sort of like Night Gallery, sort of like this, and I believe it was a horror anthology series. And I can't for the life of me remember the name of it, but it was.
There's a few lost ones, like James Coburn hosted one called Dark Room. That was. Really
I don't remember
obscure.
that one either.
That was really weird and had some good stuff. And then a lot of the Tales of the Unexpected were in here under various titles. But that one I'm unfamiliar with.
They came back in the 80s. I mean, the whole sort of horror anthology came back. You had Tales from the Dark Side and
Monsters and the new Twilight Zone.
Sure, HBO did Tales from the Crypt. So there are always attempts being made to revive that genre.
But it works better in horror, I guess, where you're telling, you tend to tell a complete story because they're so plot driven.
Yeah.
Less character driven.
I also have to say that going through these pages that you sent me, I cheated. I mean, I circled all the primetime stuff. I picked my primetime programs, but I went back and looked at the morning shows, the Saturday morning shows. Blew my mind. And also all the stuff that was in syndication here in New York. That Batman was gone by 1968, so it was already running at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't know if I Dream of Jeannie was still around, but and Hogan's. These shows were already in repeats.
Yeah, and weren't that old.
Addams Family. No, they were they were 2 or 3 years old. F Troop. So I assume, because I'm not seeing them here in primetime, that they were all gone.
Yeah,
by 1971. But amazing to see the lineups in the afternoons.
Oh, it's a kid's dream. Because, I mean, the Addams Family only went, 3 seasons, I think?
And to see the Munsters and to see all of these shows in the middle of the day. And, when we were kids, you ran home and you watched on Channel 11 and Channel 9 and Channel 5 here in New York. That's what you watched. You watched Get Smart. And you watched the Munsters, and you watched F Troop, and you watched Batman, and you'd catch Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Star Trek had to be in syndication by then.
Yeah,
Star Trek was there and gone.
Yeah, Time Tunnel.
By 1971, Time Tunnel, sure.
Land of the Giants.
Land of the Giants. Bless your heart.
Classics.
Bless your heart.
Classics. Well, thank you so much for doing this. As I said, it's been a long requested episode.
I need the names and the addresses of the people who requested this.
I'll give you their full details.
Yeah.
But there's more than one. There's more than, I would say, more than 5.
Well, more than 5.
More than 5.
You'll swell my head. It was flattering to be in this company, and you got a fun premise. And congratulations on how many shows?
470 something, almost 500 we've done.
You're a deeply disturbed man.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have my admiration. And I want to meet Fred Schneider and Fee Waybill.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll introduce you, and I'll never hear the word Gorn from Star Trek the same way again after talking to Fred Schneider.
What was Schneider's? I need to know before I sign off. I'm a big B-52s fan. I got to work with them once. What was Schneider's favorite? What was his standout?
Flintstones, which isn't a huge surprise. And him and Kate Pearson are massive Star Trek fans.
Are they? Didn't they do a Flintstones theme of some kind?
He did for the movie.
Yeah. I remember Kate Pearson singing.
He tells this in this episode. He goes, "I just love a Gorn." Me and Kate, we both bought Gorns, and he's going on and on about the Gorn, and I can't hear the word Gorn anymore.
I'm such a fan, and I'm a fan of the Tubes. So you've booked some cool people, and you've really taken this premise to absurd lengths, and I admire you for it.
It's a high compliment.
Thanks for being a fan of GGACP.
Of course, it's perfect. I mean, the overlap between, if you love my show, you love your show. I think that is.
Thank you. I mean, our show started as a lark, and then kind of morphed into this oral history. We really never had, we didn't have those kind of grand designs. But it's 7 years later. It's fun.
That's how the best things
It is nice
happen.
to preserve this history. It makes me feel like we're doing something of value. This was a blast. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go down to York Avenue. I'm gonna get on the bus. I'm going to go look for the Barbizon School of Modeling at 574 Fifth Avenue. See if I can get a contract. Ken, this was a blast. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for putting me in this cool company.
That's Frank, everybody. Noted Barbizon model. Hopefully I wish him the best in his career. Probably not runway. I'm thinking he's more of a catalog guy, but, you know, I haven't been in the modeling game in a long time, so I may be wrong. Things have changed, but I wish him the best of luck. Again, check out Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Collosal Podcast with him as the co-host. It is a great show. I am incredibly envious of some of their guests. That implies that some I'm not. I guess that's true. But Dave Thomas, Andrea Martin, they've had guests that I've just wish I could get, and I haven't. So you can listen to them there. And, you know, maybe we'll trade. I'll see if I can get him. Fred Schneider. Anyway, that is the podcast this week. And again, we made it happen. You guys requested them, and we got them on. So if there are other guests that you would like to see on the show, or hear on the show, rather, you can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com. Also have the Patreon, patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor. You can do $1 a month, $2 a month, whatever you want. Been putting some bonus content up on there, early episodes, that sort of thing. If you have something you'd like to see on there that would spark you to join, let me know at ken@icanread.com or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or at tvguidance or at Kenneth W. Reed on all the social media stuff. Or you can message me on Patreon if you do that. And anyone you recommend or you request to be on the show, I always try to get them to varying degrees of success. Sometimes it takes a while, but I get them anyway. So I'll be here next week. I hope you will too, for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
Now you ruined the show.